I've worked a lot of strange jobs in my life, but none of them stuck with me like the year I spent as a junior comms clerk on Halcyon Station. You ever heard of it? Probably not. Most people haven't. It's a ring station, way out past the Tarsai Belt, built where 9 trade lanes cross like threads in a knot. The kind of place where 40 different species breathe the same recycled air and pretend they don't hate each other. I was 23, fresh off Earth, barely knew how to tie my own boots in low gravity. And I'm telling you this story because I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. I was close enough to hear her breathing. So let me take you back. The thing you have to understand about that time is that humanity was new. Not new like a baby. New like the guy who shows up to a card game where everyone already knows each other, and they let him sit down only because the rules say they have to. We'd been admitted to something called the Stellar Concord about 6 years before all this. Probationary status. That's the polite word they used. Probationary. Like we were on parole. Like at any moment somebody could decide we hadn't earned our chair and quietly slide us back out the airlock. And the Galactics never let us forget it. I don't know how to explain what that felt like unless you've lived it. You'd walk into a corridor and conversations would just stop. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a little hush, a little tilt of the head, the way people look at a stray dog that wandered into a restaurant. We weren't impressive to them. That's the truth nobody back home wanted to hear. On the galactic scale, humans are average, middle of the pack. We're not the strongest species out there, not even close. The Bronts could fold steel with their bare hands. We're not the fastest. The Alani could outrun a hovercart on foot. We're not the smartest, not the longest-lived, not the best at anything you could put on a chart. We were just there. Loud, soft, breakable little things that laughed too much and cried at music. So you can imagine how the Drevani felt about us. Let me tell you about the Drevani. If you ever want to know what a soldier race looks like when they've been winning wars for 9,000 years, you look at a Drevani. Tall. I mean tall, easily 2.5 meters, most of them. Gray hide that's almost like armor plate with these ridges running down the spine. 4-fingered hands, each finger ending in something between a nail and a hook. And eyes. Pale gold eyes that never seemed to blink at the right time. They were warriors. That was the whole identity, the whole religion of them. Every Drevani child trained in the trials from the time they could stand. Honor, standing, proof. Those 3 words were carved over the door of basically everything they built. And here's the part that matters. The Drevani had a tradition. When a new species joined the Concord, the Drevani would issue a challenge, a formal one, the Trial of Standing, they called it. It wasn't a fight to the death or anything that dramatic. It was an exhibition, a contest in their great arena, broadcast across the whole Concord, where the new species had to send a champion to face a Drevani champion, not to win, necessarily. Nobody expected the new species to win. The Drevani always won. The point was to show that you'd show up, that you had the spine to walk into their arena and take a beating with your head held high. Most species sent their biggest, their strongest. And most species lost politely, painfully, and quietly, and went home with their probation intact, having proven they could endure. For 6 years, humanity had dodged the trial. Excuses, paperwork, scheduling. Our diplomats were terrified of it, because we knew the truth. We had nobody who could stand toe-to-toe with a Drevani. We'd send somebody, they'd get folded up in 9 seconds, and the whole galaxy would watch the human champion crumple and decide, yeah, those soft little apes can't even endure. So we kept dodging. And then, the year I'm talking about, the Drevani stopped accepting the excuses. His name was Sorrek. Sorrek of House Drevani. And he wasn't just any Drevani champion. He was the champion. 311 victories in the arena. Undefeated. The youngest fighter in 2 centuries to earn the title of Warbreaker, which I gathered was something like being knighted by God himself if God carried a glaive. I remember the first time I saw him in person. He came through the station on his way to the arena complex, and the whole concourse just emptied for him. People pressed themselves against the walls. He walked down the center of that corridor like the floor had been laid specifically for his feet, and maybe it had. He didn't look at any of us, not once. We were furniture to him, less than furniture, at least furniture is useful. And the thing about Sorrek, the thing everyone said, was that he didn't just want to win. He wanted to humiliate. In his last 3 trials he'd taken species that had every right to be proud, and he dismantled them in ways that left their whole civilizations quiet for a year. He'd made a point of it. He believed, and he said so openly in interviews that got broadcast everywhere, that some species simply did not belong in the conquered. That standing should be earned in blood and discipline, not handed out by committees. And he had decided humanity was the proof of everything wrong with the conquered. We were his favorite target. He talked about us in his speeches, the borrowed species, the guests who forgot they were guests. He said we'd been let in out of pity, and that pity was a poison, and that the kindest thing the conquered could do was let him show the galaxy exactly what we were worth. So when the trial finally got locked onto the calendar, no more dodging, the diplomats had run out of road, Sorrek requested the assignment personally. He wanted to be the one to break the human. Now here's where she comes in. I want to be careful telling you about her, because in my memory she's grown about 10 feet tall and started glowing, and that's not fair to who she actually was. So let me try to give you the real version. Her name was Mara Solis. Captain Mara Solis, technically, though she hated the rank and almost never used it. She was maybe 35. Not big. That's the first thing you noticed if you were expecting a champion. She was small, lean, compact, maybe a head shorter than me, and I'm not tall. Dark hair she kept cropped short because she said long hair was a handle for your enemies, which I thought was a joke until I realized she meant it completely. She had a scar through one eyebrow, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like she'd already finished the conversation in her head and was just waiting for your mouth to catch up. She wasn't even supposed to be the one. That's the thing nobody remembers right. She wasn't a champion. She was a combat instructor. She trained Marines for the Conquered's Joint Defense Corps, one of maybe a dozen humans they'd let into that program, mostly as a goodwill gesture. She taught hand-to-hand and zero-G boarding tactics. She wasn't famous. She wasn't a celebrity fighter. She was just the woman who'd been quietly, steadily good at a hard job for a long time without anyone noticing. How she ended up as humanity's champion is its own story, and most of it was politics I didn't understand at the time. The short version is that the people who were supposed to go got cold feet, one after another, and the clock ran out. And somebody somewhere looked at the list of every human in the sector with any combat credential at all, and her name was on it, and she happened to be on Halcyon, and they sent her the request because there was nobody left to send. I was in the room when she got the message. That's not a brag, I was the comms clerk. I was in the room for everybody's messages. I just happened to be the one who handed her the tablet. She read it, whole thing, slow. Then she set it down on the desk, face down, and she said, and I'll never forget this because it was so calm it scared me, she said, "Okay. That's it, okay." No drama, no speech, just a woman accepting something heavy and not flinching. I said, "Captain, you know who they're sending, right? You know it's Sorrek." And she looked at me with that look, the one where she'd already finished the conversation, and she said, "I know exactly who they're sending." The next 2 weeks were the strangest 2 weeks of my life. See, the moment her name went public, Captain Mara Solis, humanity's champion for the Trial of Standing, the whole Conquered lost its mind. Not because they were impressed, the opposite, because they couldn't believe how bad a choice it was. The Drevani sent a champion 2.5 meters tall, 311 victories, undefeated, a literal warbreaker. And humanity countered with a small middle-aged woman who taught a class. The betting markets, and yes, The galactics bet on the trials openly. It was a whole industry. The betting markets didn't even bother listing odds at first. They just listed it as a foregone conclusion. Then, when people insisted on betting anyway, the odds came out so lopsided I'm not sure the math even worked. Something like 400 to 1 against her surviving the first exchange. Sorrek, when he heard who they'd sent, laughed. There's footage. He laughed on camera in front of the Drevani press, and he said, they translated it for us, he said. They have sent me their grandmother. That clip played everywhere. They have sent me their grandmother. For 2 weeks you couldn't walk past a public screen without hearing it. And the worst part, most humans agreed with him. The mood back home was awful. People were furious, not at Sorrek, at us, at our own diplomats, for sending what they assumed was a lamb to slaughter and putting the whole species' dignity on the chopping block. There were protests. There were petitions to pull her out. There were op-eds with titles like, "We are about to be humiliated in front of the galaxy, and it is our own fault." Through all of it, Mara said nothing. She just trained. I used to watch her train. The station had a low-grav exercise deck, and she'd booked it for 2 hours every night late, when nobody else wanted it. I had the night comms shift, so I'd finish my rounds and then I'd come down and sit in the observation gallery and watch, because honestly there was nothing else interesting happening on that whole rotten station, and I think part of me wanted to understand what I was watching. Here's what surprised me. She didn't train like a fighter in a movie. There was no punching bag, no screaming, no montage music. She'd spend the first 40 minutes just moving, slow, almost like dance, shifting her weight from foot to foot, turning, dropping, rolling back up, over and over, boring to watch, honestly. I asked her once what she was doing and she said, learning the floor. Learning the floor. The arena's going to have its own gravity, its own surface, its own air. I won't get to practice there. So I learn every floor. I learn to feel what's under me without looking, so that on the day, whatever's under me, my body already knows the question and I'm only solving the answer. I didn't fully get it then. I get it now. The other thing she did was study Sorrek. Endlessly. She had footage of all 311 of his victories, and she watched them the way other people watch comfort shows on a loop, half asleep, again and again, until I genuinely worried about her. But she wasn't watching them like a fan. She'd pause, rewind, lean in, mutter to herself. One night I asked her, "What are you even looking for? The guy's never lost. There's nothing to find." And she said something I've thought about probably 1,000 times since. She said, "A fighter who's never lost has never had to learn what to do when he's losing. He's never been in the dark. He's only ever fought from in front. I'm not looking for how he wins, Danny. I'm looking for the 1 second in every fight where he assumed he'd already won and stopped paying attention." She tapped the screen, froze it on Sorrek's face mid-victory, this look of total certainty. "There it is," she said quietly. "Every time, right there, that look, that's the door. I want to tell you about the night before the trial, because it's the part nobody ever asks about, and it's the part that matters most to me." She wasn't training. She was sitting in the gallery, where I usually sat, looking out at the stars through the big viewport. I came in to bring her some real coffee, actual Earth coffee, which on Halcyon cost about a week's wages and which I'd been saving, because I figured if anybody deserved it, she did. I sat down next to her. We didn't say anything for a while, just looked at the stars. Then she said, without looking at me, "You think I'm going to lose?" It wasn't a question, and I'm not proud of this, but I didn't lie to her. I couldn't, not to her. I said, "I think he's the best there's ever been, and I think you're really good, but I don't know how good is enough against the best there's ever been." She nodded slowly, like I'd said something reasonable, took a sip of the coffee, closed her eyes for a second, just enjoying it. "You know what nobody understands about us," she said, "about humans." "What?" "They keep measuring the wrong thing." She turned the cup in her hands. "They measure how strong we are, how fast, how smart, And by every one of those measures, we're average, and so they've decided we're nothing. And they're not wrong about the measurements. We are average. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I can outmuscle a Drevani. I can't. Sorrek could break me in half and not finish his sentence. That's not super comforting, Captain. She laughed, a real one. It's not supposed to be. Listen, she leaned forward. Strength runs out. Speed runs out. Every species in this Concord that's stronger than us, faster than us, smarter than us, every single one of them has a point where the math says stop, where it stops being worth it, where the cost of continuing is more than they're willing to pay, and so they yield because yielding is the sensible thing to do. She looked at me. We don't have that point. That's the whole thing. That's the only thing. We're the species that keeps going after the sensible point. We're the ones who get back up the time you're sure we won't. Not because we're brave. Because we're bad at quitting. It's almost a defect, honestly. But out here, surrounded by people who all know exactly when to stop. She smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was something older than that. A thing that doesn't stop is a kind of monster they've never met. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think anyone on the station did. The trial was set for the next day in the Drevani Grand Arena, and arena is too small a word. Picture a bowl of stone and steel that could hold 100,000 spectators. Picture every seat full. Picture the Concord's banners hanging from the rafters, all 40 member species, with the human flag near the bottom edge because we were newest, smallest, last. And picture the broadcast. Because that's the thing, it wasn't just the 100,000 in the seats. It was every world in the Concord, billions of them. And back on Earth, it was the middle of the night in most places, but nobody was sleeping there either. Every screen on my home planet was tuned to this. To her. To one small woman, walking into a stone bowl on the far side of the galaxy, to face the most dangerous fighter in 9,000 years of recorded history. I got a press credential through my comms job. Lowest tier, I was basically standing in a service corridor that opened onto the arena floor. But I was there. I could see her. I want you to know that. Everything I'm about to tell you, I didn't watch on a screen. I was 40 meters away. They brought Sorrek out first. The Drevani know how to make an entrance. The lights cut. A single drum, deep, the kind you feel in your sternum before you hear it. Then a war horn, long and low. And then the lights came up on him, standing at the far gate in his full battle harness, black and gold plates, the glaive across his back, the warbreaker's mark burning on his chest. 100,000 voices roared. He raised one arm, just one, and the roar doubled. He soaked it in, turned a slow circle so every section could see him. And the whole time this look on his face, pure, calm, unshakable certainty, the look from the footage, the one Mara had pointed at, that's the door. He stepped to the center of the ring and he waited. And as he waited, he looked toward the human gate, and even from 40 meters away, even across a face that wasn't built like ours, I swear I could read what was in it. Boredom. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't even interested. He'd already won this fight in his head 2 weeks ago, the moment he heard who they'd sent. They have sent me their grandmother. The horn sounded again. And the human gate opened. I held my breath. Most of the arena did the opposite. There was a wave of sound, but it wasn't a cheer. It was a kind of murmur, this low, rolling thing, half curiosity and half pity, the sound a crowd makes when they're about to watch something they're a little ashamed to be watching. And out she walked. No music, no entrance. The Drevani hadn't bothered to prepare one for her, and she hadn't asked. She just walked out of the gate and into the light in plain dark fatigues, no armor, no weapon, her hands loose at her sides. She looked so small. I heard somebody behind me, one of the alien press, make a sound I didn't have a translation for, but I didn't need one. It was the sound of disappointment, of an audience realizing the show was going to be over very fast. Mara walked to the center of the ring, stopped about 3 meters from Sorrek, and she looked up at him, way up. She barely came to the middle of his chest, and she didn't flinch, and she didn't pose, and she didn't say anything. She just looked at him, steady, patient, like she'd already finished the conversation. And Sorrek looked down at her. And he smiled. The translator feeds carried it to the whole Concord, so everyone heard what he said next. He didn't whisper it. He wanted it heard. He spread his arms, gesturing to the 100,000 seats, to the banners, to the billions watching, and he said, "This is your champion. This is what humanity offers after 6 years of hiding. A creature I could end with a closed hand." He laughed, and the laugh boomed through the arena. "Little human, I have fought kings. I have broken the pride of 40 worlds, and they send me you. You should not be afraid. You should be ashamed. You do not belong on this floor. You never did. None of you ever did." He leaned down, bringing that huge gold-eyed face close to hers, and the whole arena went silent to hear it. And he said, softer now, almost gentle, almost kind, "Yield now, before the horn. Kneel, and I will let you keep your dignity, and your people can pretend this was mercy instead of mathematics. It is the only sensible thing left to you." He was offering her the door out, the polite loss, the one every other species had taken. And the arena waited. 100,000 in the seats, billions on the screens, every human on Earth holding their breath in the middle of the night. Mara Solis looked up at the most dangerous being in 9,000 years. And she smiled back at him. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the one I'd seen the night before on the observation deck, something older than nice. And she said, quiet, but the feeds caught every word, and I heard it carry across that whole stone bowl like a stone dropped in still water. "You keep saying sensible like it's supposed to scare me." She rolled her shoulders, settled her weight, learned the floor. "Sweetheart, I'm human. We left sensible on the launch pad.